Jesus Christ. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus faced the most agonizing moment of his earthly life. Knowing the immense suffering and crucifixion ahead, he prayed with such intensity that his sweat became like drops of blood. He pleaded with God to remove the cup of suffering from him if possible, yet submitted to divine will with the words, "Not my will, but yours be done." This was not just a moment of fear, but one of deep emotional turmoil and overwhelming spiritual burden. His disciples, whom he asked to stay awake and pray with him, repeatedly fell asleep, leaving him to endure the moment alone. The silence from heaven and the absence of comfort deepened his anguish, making him feel abandoned, even before the cross. Betrayal was imminent, and he knew that one of his closest followers would hand him over to his enemies. Despite his divine nature, Jesus experienced the full weight of human dread, grief, and isolation. In that dark hour, he bore the anticipation of humanity's sins upon himself. It was a moment of intense vulnerability, yet also one of profound obedience and courage. Prophet Muhammad. The Prophet Muhammad's darkest hour came during the year of sorrow, when he lost both his wife Khadija and his uncle Abu Talib. Khadija had been his greatest source of emotional support, while Abu Talib had protected him from political enemies. Their deaths left him exposed to increased hostility from the Quraysh tribe, who began to persecute him more harshly than ever before. Seeking new alliances, he traveled to Taif hoping for kindness and support, but was instead met with rejection, mockery, and stones. Bleeding and humiliated, he took refuge in a garden, where he prayed not for revenge but for mercy and guidance. To make matters worse, divine revelation paused for a time, leaving him in spiritual silence and uncertainty. This combination of grief, humiliation, and isolation was crushing. Yet even in the lowest point of his mission, he did not abandon his calling or question God's wisdom. Instead, he patiently endured, showing a strength that would shape the future of Islam. His darkest hour was one of loss, rejection, and spiritual trial, but also of unshaken resolve. Siddhartha Gautama, Buddha. As Siddhartha Gautama sat under the Bodhi tree in search of enlightenment, he was assaulted by Mara, the embodiment of illusion, temptation, and fear. Mara conjured frightening visions, summoned violent storms, and sent his seductive daughters to break Siddhartha's concentration. Yet the true challenge was not external, but internal. He faced the depths of his own ego, desires, and doubts. Mara questioned his worthiness and right to seek enlightenment, shaking the very core of his resolve. Despite this, Siddhartha remained immovable, his meditation undisturbed by fear or longing. He touched the earth to bear witness to his past efforts and merit, a symbolic gesture that affirmed his readiness. This silent battle tested his humanity more than any physical trial could. He transcended the illusions of self, pain, and fear, breaking free from the cycles of rebirth. His darkest hour was an invisible war of the mind, but it was also the crucible of his transformation. When dawn broke, Siddhartha had become the Buddha, having conquered the last shadows of ignorance. Moses faced his darkest moment after years of leading the Israelites through the wilderness, when he lost his temper at the waters of Meribah. The people were once again complaining, and God instructed Moses to speak to a rock to bring forth water. In a moment of frustration, Moses struck the rock twice with his staff instead of speaking as commanded. Though water flowed from the rock, God considered Moses' actions a lack of trust and disrespect for his holiness. As punishment, God declared that Moses would not be allowed to enter the promised land. For a leader who had sacrificed so much and endured so long, this judgment was heartbreaking. He would only be allowed to see the land from a distance before dying. It was a moment of regret, failure, and unfulfilled dreams. Though he remained faithful, Moses carried this sorrow to the end of his life. His darkest hour was not marked by enemies, but by the weight of his own mistake. Job's darkest hour unfolded when he lost everything he held dear: his wealth, his children, and finally his health. Afflicted with painful sores and sitting in ashes, he found himself abandoned by society and misunderstood by friends. His companions insisted that he must have sinned to deserve such suffering, while his wife urged him to curse God and die. Job, however, remained steadfast in his refusal to abandon his faith, even while demanding answers from God. What made his trial even more agonizing was God's silence, leaving him without explanation or comfort. He questioned the fairness of life, wondering why the righteous suffer while the wicked prosper. The emotional torment became as severe as the physical pain he endured. Yet he never fully turned against God, choosing instead to voice his anguish in prayer. His endurance eventually led to divine vindication and restoration. Still, his darkest hour was a test of unimaginable sorrow and spiritual loneliness. Krishna. Though revered as a divine figure, Krishna's final days were marked by deep sorrow and irreversible loss. A curse brought destruction upon his Yadava clan, who fell into drunken violence and turned on each other in a brutal civil war. Despite Krishna's efforts to guide and protect them, he could not prevent the prophecy of doom from unfolding. Watching his people self-destruct was a painful sight for a leader who had devoted himself to righteousness and dharma. After the massacre, Krishna withdrew into the forest, choosing solitude over the chaos left behind. There, as he rested beneath a tree, A hunter named Jara mistook him for a deer and shot him with an arrow. The wound was fatal, fulfilling a prophecy Krishna himself had long known. His death marked the end of the Dvapara Yuga and symbolized the fading of divine presence from the world. It was a quiet, tragic end to a life of cosmic significance. Krishna's darkest hour was the collapse of everything he had built and cherished. Abraham's darkest moment came when God commanded him to sacrifice his beloved son, a test that tore at the heart of both faith and fatherhood. He obeyed without protest, journeying with his son to the appointed mountain in heavy silence. The emotional torment of preparing to take his own child's life in obedience to God was immense. His son, in an incredible act of faith, accepted the situation without resistance, further intensifying Abraham's internal struggle. As he raised the knife, an angel intervened, halting the act and providing a ram as a substitute. Though the sacrifice was never completed, the psychological weight of that moment lingered. Abraham had proven his obedience, but the memory of that trial must have haunted him. It was a moment where love, duty, and fear collided in agonizing conflict. His willingness to let go of what he loved most embodied the peak of submission. That hour tested the very limits of human devotion and trust. St. Peter's darkest hour occurred on the night of Jesus' arrest, when fear overcame loyalty. Though he had vowed to stand by Jesus even unto death, Peter denied knowing him 3 times before the rooster crowed. Each denial brought him further from the man he believed himself to be, a devoted disciple and courageous follower. After the 3rd denial, the rooster crowed, and Jesus turned and looked at him, triggering instant remorse. Overwhelmed by guilt, Peter fled and wept bitterly, devastated by his own cowardice. This failure was especially crushing because of Peter's previous boldness and promises. In that moment, he was not a rock of the church, but a man broken by fear and shame. The darkness he faced was internal, self-betrayal and regret that cut deeper than any sword. Yet this moment became the foundation of his humility and future strength. His darkest hour transformed him into the leader he was destined to become. Laozi, the ancient Chinese sage, reached his darkest hour not through personal loss, but through disillusionment with society. He saw the world consumed by greed, war, and imbalance, far from the harmonious life advocated in the Tao. Disheartened, he chose to abandon civilization, riding westward on a water buffalo in search of peace. As he reached the border, a guard recognized him and asked him to record his wisdom before departing. This resulted in the Tao Te Ching, a text that became a cornerstone of Chinese philosophy and spiritual life. Yet his departure wasn't just physical, it was an emotional withdrawal from a world that had lost its way. His sorrow came from watching humanity move further from natural balance and inner peace. The detachment was not out of indifference, but from a painful recognition that his words might go unheeded. His final journey was both an exile and a legacy. Laozi's darkest hour birthed one of history's most enduring spiritual teachings, Zoroaster. Zoroaster's darkest hour came in his final days, when violence struck the heart of his spiritual mission. Despite years of devotion and gaining the support of King Vishtaspa, he remained a target for those who clung to the old polytheistic ways. Enemies of his teachings launched an attack on the fire temple during a sacred moment of prayer. Many of his followers were killed, and Zoroaster himself was struck down while in the act of worship. His death was sudden, violent, and tragic, especially in a space meant for peace and reverence. The destruction of the temple was symbolic of the resistance his reforms faced. For a man who preached truth, righteousness, and cosmic order, seeing his spiritual family destroyed was devastating. Yet he did not run or resist. He died standing for his beliefs. The fire of his teachings, however, continued to burn in the hearts of his followers. His darkest hour was a martyr's death, one that solidified his role as a prophet of justice. If you liked this video, you won't want to miss our next one. 25 interesting facts about Islam, packed with surprising insights and thought-provoking details. From ancient traditions to modern-day practices, we're diving deep into what makes Islam one of the world's most fascinating religions. Whether you're curious, learning, or just love interesting facts, this one's for you. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss it.